right. Hi, everybody. I'm here to, my name is Kelly Dunning. I'm a professor at the Halp School with Temple and all the folks putting on the conference today. Big thank you to everybody who organized, especially our students. It's just such an amazing day, and thank you all for being here. I'm here to introduce Dan Thompson. In addition to being faculty at the University of Wyoming, Dan currently heads the large carnivore section of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. He's responsible for science-based management and monitoring of large carnivores such as mountain lions, wolves, black and grizzly bears throughout Wyoming and also the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Dan has a PhD from South Dakota State, which he received in 2009, evaluating population demographics of mountain lions in the beautiful Black Hills of South Dakota, as well as here in Wyoming. Dan has been studying large carnivore ecology for over a decade. His career interests include large carnivore expansion, recolonization, interactions among carnivores that share a habitat, such as here in the GYE, predator-prey dynamics, and the applicability of research towards management. It's really great to have a speaker like Dan, especially with so many of our grad students in the room, because what he really specializes in is how to take science and translate it into practical boots on the ground management. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Interesting time slot between 3:99 and Tigers right after lunch. But appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Dan Thompson. I guess I'm one of those sick monsters alluded to in the last talk that does some of this work on these animals. So my talk today, when we use the term large carnivore, I'm referencing these species, mountain lions, black bears, wolves, and grizzly bears. But today I'm probably going to be talking more about that human component in relation to these species. And you'll hopefully see some similarities between earlier talks and future talks at this workshop. I'm going to take a little tangent and talk about the word coexistence. By definition, it's species that are, or doesn't have to be, well, we're talking about wildlife today, but this is also for plant species, vegetation, existing in the same time or place. I think where the term can get misused is an idealized concept of or misinterpretation of coexistence to peaceful coexistence. So we do this as humans with societal rifts and things like that. But it's, I have the joke slide, but I think there's a notion that some things are more idealized than others. I apologize to any atheists out there, but I think it's important to coexistence doesn't mean a utopian paradise where no eggs are broken, I guess. Coexistence is beautifully more convoluted than an idealized concept. This is what shaped how we are here now. It's what shaped all ecosystems to evolve through time and adaptation, niche partitioning, all these concepts that the grad students have learned about to get to this point. Again, this amazing gift that we have in the GYE that Todd mentioned, and our other speakers have mentioned, that we have this intact guild of species that were here 1,000 years ago. They're still here today. We talk, other places talk about rewilding. Now, while wolves were reintroduced, they were on their way back. And so what we have here is not more of a rewilding, but a remembering. And I have that picture of a wolf there. A great example, wolves brought back. The elk didn't remember what wolves were for a while, right? So things changed quite quickly with elk, but they figured it out. The hunters that were mad and outfitters that were mad because elk weren't where they used to be, they figured it out too. So there's a lot of remembering of how to do things and adapting to those situations. And so when we talk about coexistence, I guess I kind of view things on more of a continuum. And so there's kind of a good and bad and the ugly for any Clint Eastwood fans out there. Luckily, most is good. We get to see these amazing, there should be a little video playing. This is the beauty of these wildlife species that are all together and learning more about them. It's very infantile what we're learning about these animals that have just now been together for a couple decades as we start to study them. Many of these species were on the brink of being gone not too many years ago. In an evolutionary scale, it's a blink, less than a blink. Again, this is the good. I also consider this the good. This is an important component, and I'll talk about it more. And it was addressed in almost every talk earlier, is this important component of education outreach. This is a part of carnivore conservation, is making sure we're engaging with children, working together as groups. Up in the right was a year and a half ago, we had a black bear workshop here. We did a tour in Teton National Park. We had Fish and Wildlife Service, Teton National Park, and myself talking to bear managers from across North America, including having guests up from Mexico, fencing bee apiaries to try to reduce that risk from getting hit by bears or skunks or other things. But again, these are the good things of that continuum. But there's also some bad. I don't know if Albert, that's one of your calves, but that is from the upper green. This is the reality of having a lot of people and a lot of carnivores on a landscape, and it is a form of coexistence. This is in Jackson, some garbage issues. That was a weanling horse killed by skeletonized by wolves in the Gros Ventre. Again, and I appreciate I wasn't the only talk with blood on it. I was afraid I was going to be. There's one earlier this morning. But again, this is part of that. And there is some ugly, of course. We have bears shot in self-defense. We have humans injured. We have animals we have to put down for killing livestock or a human safety threat. The bottom right is a human fatality. But again, it's this continuum that is what we're living in right now. This reality we're living in right now. Now, this man up here, Lee Brook, sorry for those of you on that side, he's also a good. He had literally had his face bit off by a grizzly bear. But this man is like one of these rare human beings that you meet that is just so upbeat in life. I interviewed him at the hospital. He's literally missing half of his face. He's like, wait, I got to talk to these guys and make sure they get what they need. He comes back. We took him back to the site a year later, hiked in with him. And so there can be good from ugly too. And that was the point there. And where is Dr. Thorstensen? Mitakuye Oyasin? Is that close? This is a Lakota term. I went to school at South Dakota State, and I worked with some tribes there too. All my relations, most tribes have this notion of the interrelatedness of everything, right? I think it's very important to talk about that synergy versus this mutual exclusivity. And this is last year on the Wind River Reservation, we did 2-day workshops of bear safety, bear education, which had tribal members, which had Game and Fish, which had the Fish and Wildlife Service. Again, all these actual collaborations together on the ground is how we move forward and thrive. And again, it's that continuum that gets us into this notion of conservation. And with large carnivores, we know there's controversy. That wide spectrum, we know that going into it. And that's how we move forward with actual conservation and conversation. And again, I was brought up earlier, the lucky thing that we have is there's not really much apathy when it comes to these animals. There's a lot of interest, and we can use that to our advantage. Now, this is what Temple asked me to talk about today, so I kind of broke it down to these 3 primary things that I think will be a recurring theme throughout, right? The key challenges, so this was brought up in and of itself is not a challenge, but we have people well less than 100 yards following these bears, but it's on a state highway system where things have gotten really awry. And so again, it gets tricky in multi-jurisdictional systems where we're trying to let people enjoy this amazing opportunity, but keeping them safe and keeping those bears from being hit, knowing that bear was hit on the highway a year later. So some of the key challenges, and I've only got a few slides for each of these, but I do think there's a lot of opinion without accountability. Those are things from a conservation and a manager perspective dealing with that. The social media aspect was brought up. Keyboard warriors out there trying to rectify the message that's going out versus what is real. The second one is more related to GYE grizzly bears. We do have a very thriving population, but it's still threatened on paper. And there's multiple reasons for that. But unless you're in this area, you hear that they're threatened and you feel that they're threatened. And it makes things much more difficult when you're dealing with a population that's been biologically recovered for 20 years. And yet there's still arguments in the background as to what is needed and what is not needed. And that is a challenge. Managing expectations, combating false narratives. I mean, that's society, right? That's a difficult one, but it is difficult to try to do that. And I swear to God, I didn't know this was going to be in Todd's talk as well. But so this particular headline, to me, I read very differently, because you don't see the headline that a record number of grizzly bears counted the last year and the year before that and the year before that. You didn't hear the headlines the 2 years previously where we had record low mortality in the last decade. Those are not the things that get the headlines. So there needs to be some context built into these. And the fact that the amount of mortality that we have for grizzly bears is not limiting the population. And then Albert brought this up. There's a general lack of trust, I think, with any governmental agency. I work for the state, but there is a general lack of trust that is hard to, I mean, I was talking to Arthur Middleton. If you just talk to every human being as a human, you could really make a lot of progress, right? But that's pretty difficult to do as overpopulated as we are. And what we do see is because of the amazing story of success for all large carnivores in North America, is that we have increasing conflict potential. And I really switched away from just saying increasing conflict to increasing conflict potential. A lot of that is because of this down here. That was a slide I'm not exactly sure where that is, but that was in relation to COVID, as was referenced earlier, where Wyoming became free America and everybody came here because you could get out and about. But we have, because of this great success story, we have a lot more potential for conflict. And that's a real component of a challenge that we have to work with that footprint in a very scrutinized fishbowl. And there again, the last talk about 399, which she brought a whole world to look at this system and grizzly bears differently, but it's also changed when they start coming into the city limits. And a lot of people feel differently depending on how close they are to you. So for science, policy, and public engagement intersection. So I was going to do a Venn diagram to show this, but bear with me for a second here. So I was trying to figure out a way how to use science as the base for how all of our decisions are made. But we have these different things pulling on that, whether it's policy, society. I'm not saying science is dead, but if anybody's heavy metal fans from the 80s, this is from the Master of Puppets album cover, which I thought was very fitting. But just to see that there is this interplay, and that's okay. That is, again, that's what true management and conservation is all about. I'm not quoting Leopold, I'm quoting Da Vinci, actually, that, study the art of science, study the science of art. They're very woven together. And I think that's the beauty of being in the position that we are on the ground, but also dealing with the policy component, dealing with the public, that the differing opinions and perspectives. So we try to go for that middle. I always make the joke, as long as everybody's ticked off at me, I don't say ticked usually, but as long as everybody's ticked off at me, I'm doing my job. But again, that science is the basal driving factor of what we do. But we also have to look at the societal humanities needs and make sure we're within the guidelines of what's good for science and for wildlife, while taking into account those other factors. That's why when we do things for wildlife populations, whether it's deer, whether it's moose, whether it's wolves, whether it's mountain lions, we do it in a public setting as this and as this. Again, I think from a policy perspective, now there's a couple things going in here. There's headline sensationalism that occurs in a lot of different journals, but last year there was a lot of interest in large carnivores in our legislature. That's a faction of those legislators listening to their public and trying to bring bills forward. They're not necessarily doing things wrong as conveyed. They think they are speaking for their public. It was a good chance to talk about these things in relation to frustrations from the public as what's going on with grizzly bears and mountain lions. It gives us a chance to interact with legislators, and it gives the public a chance to interact with legislators. That's how I see all these things, concepts melding together for the future. And here's the fun one. So lessons learned and cross-regional collaboration. I was really happy to be able to talk about this because I think The GYE grizzly bears is a great example of how you can bring agencies with different visions, entities with different mindsets, land management agencies, tribal partners all together to view things on an ecosystem level. And I think that's a very wise concept moving forward. Talking with the people that are directly negatively impacted by these animals. One of the biggest things I've learned in my career, which is well more than a decade. That was an old thing, but I appreciate that it's only been a decade. Being available and responsive to deal with conflict situations as immediately as possible is one of the biggest components of successful large carnivore conservation on the ground. And I think people that live with them would agree with that. Again, that a lot of these are obvious concepts, but consistency and integrity. Albert's called me and yelled at me because we wouldn't verify a calf before, but we have to be consistent, right? And we can still talk about that at the end of the day. Telling people what they want to hear isn't going to help. There's some pretty hard conversations that are had, but that again is how you maintain that going forward. Doing versus talking. There's a lot of talking that happens versus just getting out there. We do a great deal of work with Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, which neighbor us in Lander where I live. And it's great to be able to work with them. We went out and we did a bunch of work with grizzly bears this spring, working side by side and working as equals. This bottom right picture, this was a camera study initiated in 2008 to assess grizzly bear abundance on that Wind River side that Wes Martell mentioned of the reservation. This is Gus Thayer, who's now a tribal council member, working with them and talking and just being on the landscape together. That is how we forge those paths forward. Listening and patience. Easier said than done sometimes, but that's obviously a lesson learned to move forward. And as was brought up multiple times, the foundation for all this is outreach, education, and based on science. I just have our Bearwise program as an example, but the proactive efforts, outreach and education, that's how things become successful. Getting out into multiple entities in multiple ways. We have gas station TV ads at every gas station. Everyone that has them, they don't all in Wyoming. Getting gas at a gas station, it'll come up and talk about bear safety because this is a very high active time for bears and the potential for conflict is high. And then I think this is something that's very important, engaging with humans as humans at their level. Whether it's skinning a dead calf with a rider or a ranch manager, it's easy. And someone who's still in the scientific community, we do a great job talking down to people. That's the quickest way to turn someone off. Same thing with this group. If I could talk down to you or something like that, it's going to turn everybody off. You have to work with your audience. And again, like here's an example. This was a music festival that you wouldn't expect a lot of these people probably, if you're stereotypical. This was in the Buffalo Valley. It got shut down because of some prejudice, I guess, in the local community, I would say. But again, talking to anybody who will, these people had a great time listening about bear safety and when they're at an overnight music metal concert. And then, let's see, can you click that video? Oh, it didn't work. Maybe not. Yeah, click on it. There you go. Oh, there wasn't audio. I get oh, there. The beauty of this was here. This was in the parking lot here 2 springs ago. Everyone in there is a bear biologist. Everybody's laughing, right? We're learning how to spray a bear at this Robo Bear. That's a huge hit for people to learn how to use bear spray properly. And then again, embracing your own significance. I think all of us do a great job taking ourselves too seriously sometimes. And so I think it's really important to get the ego out of this. It's ecosystem, not ego system. That's me standing here and we were doing aerial captures, watching the helicopter come in with the grizzly bears, and I felt pretty insignificant that day. But again, I'm closing up here, but everything we do is in respect of the species and the fortune of working with them. But like I said, it's also important to have a little fun and laugh at life a little bit, laugh at yourself a little bit, and make sure you're enjoying that. And I only have one slide looking to the future. I think I have a more positive outlook than others, I guess. Um, I feel in North America, large carnivores are here to stay. I don't see any way where they'd go away like they did in the past unless we bring back poisoning and governmental programs to eradicate them. It's just not something that's going to happen. Despite the sins of the past and the current opinions, I do believe this is a great mantra for the future. The way to maintain this going forward is what we've talked about with other things. We have to make sure you're available. We have to monitor these animals. We have to know what's going on with these animals so we can convey that to the public. And we also need to make sure we're working with kids to the elderly. So we're available to talk to them. And for the most part, I feel we've really provided the regulatory framework and that, well, I know we have from the GYE, the framework and the protections from habitat in place for the future. Again, the future relies on our adaptability and attitude toward these. And I do, when I say both, I believe we can have human livelihoods. I believe we can still do everything. I can believe we can have these animals maintain a thriving population on the landscape. But there's some things, it's going to get ugly now and then, right? And we have to be willing to allow that to happen. And I believe that's time. Thank you.